This in the name of First Nation. Our clerk today is Ms. Sheila Gurry. I don't see any councillors in attendance online. Today's Governance and Priorities Committee meeting will be held in accordance with the Community Charter and Council Procedural Bylaw 2018 number 7272. If during the meeting any members of the gallery has a question on a matter that was considered by the committee today, please sign up on the sheet located on the table by the double doors to my left. Please note that the council procedure bylaw has been updated, so questions will only be taken on staff reports or other business items. I know that the folks in the room understand the decorum we require in this place. This is our place of business, so I'm not going to go through all of the rules. Just move on. So introduction of late items. Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Chair. So for late items today, we have agenda item 6A1, progress and next steps on Donut Economics Framework implementation, adding the report titled Nanaimo Donut Economic Framework Awareness Program. And that's it, Chair.
Thank you. So could I have a motion for adoption of the agenda as amended? Councillor Prano and Councillor Thorpe seconding. All those in favor? Seeing none opposed, we'll carry on. Next, can I have a motion for adoption of minutes as circulated? Councillor Armstrong, seconded by Councillor Eastmere, sorry. Yes. All those in favor? None opposed? I'm glad I'm amusing people this afternoon. So the next item on the agenda is agenda planning, upcoming topics and initiatives, and this is to be introduced by Sheila Gurry, the Director of Legislative Services. Ms. Gurry.
Thank you again, Chair, and good afternoon, committee. So on page 20 of your original agenda package is the upcoming topics and initiatives sheet that outlines today's topics, and then the remainder of GPCs for the rest of the year, the upcoming topics scheduled for those days. So we have for December 2nd, the annually scheduled e-town hall, which is an opportunity for community feedback on the draft 2025 to 2029 financial plan. And that'll be at a 7 p.m. start, so a little bit different than regularly the 1 p.m. start, which we have on December 9th, transit-oriented areas and public and parking in the downtown. And those are based on 2 motions from council. And I'll be speaking of a staff initiative later on that is requested to be added to that day that I'll seek a motion from the committee on. And then for January 2025 and the date to be determined, we have DPA8 form and character design guidelines and urban tree canopy management strategy. So those are integrated action plan items which are scheduled for January 2025. So not very many meetings left in the year. Future GPC topics, dates to be determined, are the City Plan Monitoring Committee, and Mr. Lindsay might mention a little bit about that when I turn it over to him in a second, but those will be coming where we're at, an update on those during the budget sessions that will be coming near the end of November. And then the next item that's a future GPC topics is incentives that support city plan. The report was going to be on today's agenda to accompany the report on Donut Economics Framework implementation. However, there was a little bit of, we wanted to review and see council's opinion on the actual motion that the incentives were coming back. So on your screen, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Lindsay to kind of walk through how we're, where we're at and where we're headed with the incentives report.
Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just briefly, and it's unusual that we come back to council and seek clarity on a motion. But in this case, as Ms. Gurry mentioned, we were scheduled to come to you today to actually talk about this topic, and staff were well underway with the report. When we started looking back at where this motion came from, if you don't recall, it came out of a discussion we were having about the downtown tax exemption programs and the hotel tax programs. And in that presentation on that day, there was one slide from staff that had some sample areas within city plan where incentives or policy work or initiatives are underway to try to incent these areas. They were simply listed as 5 examples. The motion made by council that day actually included those 5 specific examples, where you see the title is more about incentives for implementing city plan. So staff started working on a report that it was more about the general 5 areas of city plan and not necessarily these specific examples, but it ended up the report wasn't matching with council's motion. So I'm here just to seek clarity from the committee if the intent was to really focus just on these 5 areas, and that's fine if that's the intent, or was it actually a broader discussion about the entire city plan and incentives across the 5 major policy areas under city plan?
Okay,
Sorry for the confusion.
so I have Councillor Armstrong and then Councillor Gesselbrock.
Mine's going back to the, sorry.
You should be live. Are you live? Oh, okay.
It was on,
Sorry,
there
go
it's,
ahead.
that's okay. So mine's going back to the GPC for the 9th of December with the Strong Towns. Is the parking management strategy going to be included in that? Because we've had many delegations from seniors and other groups concerned about the lack of parking. So I just want to make sure that that gets addressed as well, because I've had emails coming again, like we had the 70 seniors sign that petition that there's not enough parking and they're struggling and da-da-da. So I just want to make sure, are we going to be doing that separately or altogether?
So that would be separate from the motion we had on the screen a moment ago, but it would be, the opportunity for that discussion would be included in the upcoming discussions on parking.
So it will come on the December 9th one, that's my question.
That's the scheduled date right now, yes.
Yeah, okay, and then going to this one, one of the concerns I have about this is I think we're, like, for me, we hear quite often, like, our taxes are so high, et cetera, and one way to help reduce taxation, obviously, is through industrialization. You know, that's why we zone some lands. Is that going to be addressed in that? Because how do we, and I mean, if you're following the donut economy, how are we going to try and get industry to Nanaimo that can support green initiatives or your donut economy? Like, I think that's a huge thing for me. Like, if, you know, we've committed to this, how can we get people to come and work here that are going to follow, you know, the, I call it the green initiative.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think those are really good questions and all things that we'd want to address in a report. Today, I'm just trying to sort out, are we actually focusing just on these 5 items and having a discussion around those? Because, like, for example, you could have a discussion around affordable housing. You already have an affordable housing strategy. You've looked at a number of initiatives that are done across other communities. You have a work plan for implementing the ones you want to focus on there. So they're not all require a monetary response. Some are policy, some are density bonusing, some are amendments to bylaws. So it's just really a question of, do you want staff's report, again, to follow the strict wording in the motion, which is just those 5 areas, or is it something a little broader on the 5 general themes of city plan?
Councillor Gesselbrock?
Thanks. Through you. I think, like, the city plan is a very large document and very broad, and so there's a lot of different areas. And so I don't think, I think all aspects have their level of importance. However, I'm curious, say if staff were working on bringing what we're doing to incentivize from elements from the city plan, how were the certain elements chosen? Since it'd be difficult to choose, you know, every aspect of it. And so I don't think at the GPC meeting, I don't think we're entirely clear. We were looking, I think, at incentive programs for city plan, and those ended up being there, because I don't recall having a discussion on, okay, what are our priorities in city plan? I do think that is a worthwhile discussion, like where are areas that we need to improve and increase our incentivization to bring those certain areas that may be lagging up to speed, or build on our strengths, or whatever our strategy is going to be. So I would be inclined to get the ball rolling on the discussion, what staff have gotten together, if folks are ready to come and present, you know, this council meeting, and then if a need to have further discussion on prioritization occurs, we can go do that. So I'd be inclined to just see what staff have already put together if they're ready, and then if we need to zoom in, narrow down on maybe some of these particular items, we can. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Thorpe.
Yeah, I think I agree with Councillor Geselbrecht, if I understood him correctly, and I certainly don't recall any motion specific to these topics per se. Mr. Lindsay, I'd be interested in a more general report, I think, outlining categories, and then we can decide to focus on what ones that we feel need attention. I certainly don't remember any discussion about supporting small business or a motion regarding that. I'm not against it, but I don't recall anything like that. And I'll comment that the bottom bullet, in my opinion, our entire transportation master plan totally prioritizes active transportation, almost at the exclusion of more traditional transportation. So again, a more general starting point for a report, I think, would be of benefit to me, and we can take it from there. That's my thought. Thank you.
Anyone else like to weigh in? That sounds like it makes sense to me to just go over an overall plan of what's missing in the action plans and how we can move forward. So, Ms. Gurry.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Perhaps just a motion stating that staff come forward with incentives that support city plan and rescind, you could rescind this motion and come forward with a city plan incentives report.
So I have a motion to rescind. Councillor Hemmons, second by Councillor Perino. All in favor? Any opposed? So the motion is to rescind the motion from last year? Sorry.
The motion would be to rescind the existing motion that came from last year and was ratified at the December 4th council meeting. That's on your screen right now, and staff have prepared an incentives report that they can bring forward to the next council meeting as planned. I mean, the next GPC meeting as planned, and from there, if there's further motions that come from that, then that would be appropriate to come after that report is presented to you.
Okay, Councillor Eastmere?
Okay, yeah, sorry, that does make sense. I was concerned that we were sending staff back to do an even more in-depth report on other incentives, and I think it's just, as Councillor Geselbrecht said, the city plan is so broad that I feel like that report could go on forever. But if you're saying there's something prepared and you're ready to bring it to us, then by all means.
Mr. Chairman, I would say staff have started a report. I'm not sure if it's going to be all of city plan, which I think is, from my perspective, a better starting point to have a general discussion. It's going to take a little bit longer. I'm not sure we'd have it ready by the next GPC, but we'll bring it back as soon as possible.
Because I think what we were saying with these priorities is these are the ones that we're most interested in seeing incentives come forward on, and I think that remains true for myself at least.
Well, then, yeah, it's kind of a bit mixed because some of them we're already supporting and working towards. Does somebody, okay, Councillor Geselbrecht?
Yeah, I mean, staff started working on a work plan for a report that some of these weren't included, or was it a broader discussion? And then sort of the brakes were put on, oh, we didn't really directly address these 5 things, and then just sort of wondering,
Yeah, I think it's, I would say generally staff started with the direction of a broader report talking about implementation and incentives for city plan overall. But just initial work on that, and a lot of that focusing on the grants and aids that you provide in different areas under those different sections. So I think there's more work to be done on that, to look at what other communities do in some of these areas and bring you back some of those options. And we're happy to do that. I just didn't want to do that and wouldn't be really complying with your motion or what was the exact wording of your motion here. So I appreciate the suggestion to rescind and come back with something more high level that council then could, or the committee could then drill down on, prioritize.
So would that report I think those points, like, we were looking, there was, you know, one area of incentivization was like downtown business development or whatever, and then we saw those points, and I think we were like, ooh, you know, like, it'd be great if we were actually, you know, using our tools to incentivize these type of things as well, and that's was the genesis of this motion. And so I think there is interest in those, but if something is, my understanding, there was something already ready to like come, and then we can have further discussion, like, will there be an outline of basically different tools at our disposal to incentivize different things that would be presented, that we could then further go down the rabbit hole on particular items.
That would be the intent, yes. Allow you to have a broader discussion of each of those themes, 'cause I think under green Nanaimo, obviously, there's more than just green infrastructure. There's a number of items there that you could pick from and prioritize that may have different, you know, buttons and levers that you could pull and push to incentivize those projects. But I think having that larger discussion before you focus on just green infrastructure is probably wise.
Great, yeah, that makes sense to me, and I'm in support of this motion, and then get something here, and then we can start the discussion.
Okay, thank you. So I had everybody in favor, except for Councillor Eastmere. Do you want to? You're in favor? Okay. You want to do it again? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none opposed, does somebody want to put forward the suggested motion? Do you want to just go over that again, Ms.?
Councillor Chair, I'm not sure if we would need a motion to come back with that report. Mr. Lindsay is saying it might not possibly be ready for the next GPC, but it would be ready maybe for the one after that. I think we would bring it forward and then have a specific motion at that time. After you've reviewed the broader discussion, have a more specific motion like the one that's on the screen right now, but more related to the actual items that you would like to dive deeper into. However, do you think we should get a motion to have the more general discussion, Mr. Lindsay, come forward to a GPC? They've just rescinded. Yeah, okay. All right, so yes, if you could have a motion that would ask for a report on incentives that support city plan, come to a future GPC meeting, that would be lovely.
Okay, so we have Councillor Armstrong, seconded by Councillor Hammonds. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, okay, we can move on to the next
Thank you.
item.
Thank you so much. So then for tentative GPC topics, and these are staff initiatives that we would require a council motion for to bring forward to a GPC topic, to a future GPC, and the topics are not-for-profit sector study. This tentative date for the GPC would be November 25th, and the details are a presentation to share the results of nonprofit sector study, which was a recommendation of the economic development strategy. So if the committee is in favor of that coming forward, staff are proposing to bring that forward on the November 25th GPC. You can do these item by item if you'd like, or we could move them all together and I could go through them all. But the next one is an overall parking management strategy, and that is tentative date scheduled for December 9th. And if you look ahead to the already scheduled meetings, Councillor Armstrong, this is where you were asking about the report from Strong Towns Nanaimo. So December 9th already has transit-oriented areas and parking in the downtown scheduled, and one is based on a council motion. Both are based on council motions, both relating to that transit-oriented areas are coming to the December 9th, and then staff are asking if the committee is in favor of having parking management strategy come to that same meeting as well. There's a public art review with a date to be determined, and that is a presentation outlining the current permanent and temporary public art program as guided by city plan, the review of support systems in place such as art and public spaces and working group and urban design roster. That's another staff initiative for a future GPC. And finally, we have Parks, Recreation, and Culture Health initiatives with a date to be determined, and that would be to update on Parks, Recreation, and Culture initiatives in partnership with Island Health and Nanaimo Division of Family Practice. a review of social prescribing, recreation prescription, and the Orange Bench program. So those are some staff initiatives for future GPC topics. You could vote on them singularly or together if the committee chooses to see those come to a future governance and priorities committee.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Gurley. So we're just a discussion, Councillor Armstrong?
Yeah, I would like to see the parking management strategy come. We've been waiting for that for 2 to 3 years. It keeps, and this other one motion was only made like less than a month ago, so I think it's really important. Secondly, the concerns that we hear from the seniors, they all are at transit hubs, and they don't use transit for many reasons. So I think it's important to have that discussion all at the same time so that a lot of the seniors want to come and present as well, so they need advance notice. Thank you.
Mr. Sims?
Thanks. Excuse me. Thanks, Chair. Just to provide a little context, so the transit-oriented parking discussion, along with Strong Towns, is really focused on as a result of the motion that Council gave, and the parking management strategy is the sort of year-long study. This will be one of many steps that staff and the consultant will be in front of Council to sort of walk through the citywide parking management strategy. So it'll be sort of a little bit more of a larger umbrella. I just wanted to set that stage.
No, thank you for that clarification.
It's actually appropriate to be on the same time.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Chair, and absolutely agree with Councillor Armstrong on the parking issues. I'm wondering if I could get a bit more of an explanation about the not-for-profit sector study, as well as, well, I'll come back to the Parks, Recreation, and Culture Health Initiatives. I was just wondering if I could I can't remember what the discussion was around the not-for-profit sector study.
Somebody want to?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if Ms. Manhas being here might be able to speak a little bit to that. If not, I look to my colleague, Mr. Lindsay.
Yes, happy to speak to that. So the not-for-profit sector study is something that we've done for the first time in the city of Nanaimo. It was something that was identified in the economic development strategy as a key item that we need to address, and so that's one of the reasons why we undertook that study. ICE-T actually helped fund half of that study, so that was also fantastic. It was something that was in our work plan. That's why we have the not-for-profit sector study, and it actually aligns really well with the economic incentives that we're going to be talking about as well later on. So, because we give considerable funding to the not-for-profit sector in our economy, so it's great to see how they are helping to implement the 5 city goals as well. But more of that information is coming in that.
So, Chair, if I can just, so are we talking about who they are, what they do, how they affect us, how we affect them? Is that kind of the idea? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, so the scope of the study includes economic, social, as well as environmental impact of the not-for-profit sector in our economy, as well as breaking them down, you know, what different categories do they fit in, as well as, you know, how are they implementing the donut economics in our economy. Okay. So yes, it's quite comprehensive, okay, and we're really pleased with the results of it so far. So we're really keen on providing that information to you in the future.
Okay, good, thank you. And if I may, Chair, on the Parks, Recreation, and Culture Health Initiatives, update on PRC initiatives in partnership with Island Health and the Nanaimo Division of Family Practice. I'm just not sure. I'm not sure what all that means. I don't get what that means and what it's for and what's our goal at the end of the day.
Mr. Harding?
Thank you, Chair. Councilor Perino. So we've been undertaking a number of initiatives. Some of it is directed by Council, yes, to work closer with some upstream solutions with health. And so we've actually been able to move forward with a number of programs and projects with the different groups. And it's more of just an update of where we've been at. Okay. And also working with VIU and a number of other programs and projects, particularly on the youth resiliency side of things. So it's more of a broader update and a little bit deeper dive into what some of the prescription for health, social prescribing means, and how we're rolling that out.
Thank you. So if I just might add a comment that in that discussion, I would really like to hear more about, say, warming centers and cooling centers and feeding centers and housing availabilities, if possible, for those things that affect our streets so much, if possible. Am I going too far out of the... And if I am, that's okay. It's just that for me, it's all about health initiatives. If we're going to have Island Health here, don't we need to discuss some of the issues around harm reduction, or is that an appropriate time? Should we put that for another time? Things like that. We just never get them. You know, we never get them here. So what I'm trying to do is grab them for everything on the planet that day.
Through the chair, I think that's a wonderful idea, but it might be a separate subject.
And that's fair.
discussion. But I think that I understand what you're saying, Councillor Perino, and perhaps Mr. Harding, we can reach out to his staff, Mr. LaBerge and Ms. Wood, and come with those aspects on the same day, around the same timing.
Or a different day, but I think it's just, we're always dealing with those on a daily basis, and it'd be nice to have that discussion about what's happening and with Island Health. What are they doing? What are we doing to help them to do more?
Almost a suggestion for another GPC
Might be.
meeting on social issues, housing,
Yeah,
health,
Yeah.
Health of unhoused people.
yeah,
et
that's
cetera.
right. Might
So-
not be appropriate for that first day that you're talking about.
So through the chair, this is the time where it would be appropriate should a member of the committee want to have a topic that they could make that motion. So if you wanted to make that motion to have that as a future GPC topic, you could do so now.
So moved.
Okay, seconder, Councillor Perino, Councillor Hammonds, all those in favor? Yes. Okay.
I do think that's topical, and it is interesting in terms of partnership and sharing space with Island Health and these other agencies, you know, potentially geared towards discussions around potential capital investments by the city, for example, like the South End Recreation Center, and looking how to partner, you know, for other medical issues and things like that. I do think that, you know, one of the biggest pressure points that we are facing is in that realm, and it'd be interesting to have a discussion around those type of partnerships, opportunities, and what are the space needs and needs in general. So thank you for that, Janice.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. Anybody else on this? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, Councillor Hammonds.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, my apologies. So I just want to confirm with Ms. Gurry, the tentative GPC topics, these aren't council motions, these are staff initiatives that we're saying we could fill our calendar with these. Okay, so the parking management strategy, I agree with Councillor Armstrong, should be popped into when we're talking about transit, and that's based off of a council motion. The other three, I waver on just a little bit, because these are just information reports, and it goes against what we're meant to be doing here. Not to say, I'm all for, I love hearing about these things, but I just wonder if this is the appropriate venue. The Parks, Rec and Culture and Health initiatives, I really appreciate Councillor Perino's motion. I think that's a really important conversation for us to have with Island Health here in the room in a GPC format where they are at the table with us and our partners, our SPOs here, et cetera, et cetera. An update on, particular initiatives, I feel like could come by email. And similarly, the public art review, that's amazing, but maybe that's a walking GPC. Maybe that's where we try to do something a little bit different than sit here and listen, to reports from staff, which again, all great, but I just want to make sure that we're using our committee time appropriately.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Councillor Hammonds. This is exactly why we've started this process, where we're asking for council motions to see if this is something you would like to see at a future GPC meeting, and or if there's another way you would like to receive this information. So really appreciate that feedback. This is exactly what we wanted to hear. So what I'm hearing right now is the parking management strategy. You could have a motion that you would like to see that with the other parking initiative going on at the December 9th GPC meeting. So I could get a motion from you for that. That would be wonderful. And then for the remainder, we could look at either having them as information reports at council meetings or via email, and or like you were mentioning, some sort of other type of GPC meeting venue, like a walk or something like that.
I think if I may, in terms of the parking management strategy, I question whether we need a motion because I believe we heard that's coming and that's good. If we need a motion, happy to put that forward. For the other three, I wonder, we already have a motion on a separate GPC item that we're unanimous on. These three, maybe we could come back to it at the next GPC and just have some thought around, I mean, I think a public art walk would be an interesting GPC, and we could have that discussion as we're out there in the community. We can invite artists along with us. That could be a really cool one for the format we're trying to do. The other two, I question whether they should be at committee, to be honest. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you very much, Councillor Hemmons. The parking management strategy, I'm sorry, I'm struggling with this one. I know it makes total sense, and staff intend to bring it forward with the others, but because it wasn't based on a council motion, that is why we're looking for a motion from you.
So I'm going to make it super clean and move that the parking management strategy be incorporated into, I'm sorry, can you scroll down a tiny bit?
Yeah,
That it be incorporated into the December 9th GPC meeting.
Thank you so much.
Second by Councillor Eastmere. All those in favor, or any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay. Next on the speaking list, I have Councillor Gesselbrock.
Great, yeah, thanks. I'm definitely interested to see the public sector study and what format it comes to. I'm not really too, whether it's a council meeting or GPC, but I just have a question around the city plan monitoring committees. I think the council motion there was May 2023, and the discussion was how are we gonna have a monitoring committee around looking at the integrated action plans in a way to increase community engagement around city plan and also get feedback from the community. And just looking, it's like been over a year, and I think it's topical to the report that's coming to council now, but I'm just curious sort of what the update on that is, and are we going to see that soon? And I just, we're 2 years in now, and I'd like to get those processes up and running.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Through you to Councillor Gesselbrock. Yeah, I see the date on that. We have, it's not noted here, we did have a discussion more recently than this motion was made, and it was after the monitoring strategy was done, which was quite some time after this motion was made. So when the monitoring strategy came before you, it was rediscussed at that time that we kind of, with the strategy, how was the monitoring committee is going to work, because the update was also going to be coming in the fall on the integrated action plans and where they were at. So coming probably, it doesn't have a date to be determined, it has a to be determined date, but I was thinking of it coming in the December dates after the budget discussions, because then you'd have more of an update of where the integrated action plans were and where monitoring committees actually fit. I'm still, when I bring it forward to you with, I'm hoping with Ms. Ting Pan, she has some recommendations on engagement in her monitoring strategy work that she's done, if monitoring committees would be the right engagement strategy or the right engagement tool to do for these, because you have the integrated action plans, monitoring strategy, they're looked at every year, and then every 4 years the integrated action plan items are going to be reviewed. What is a monitoring strategy? Like, what is the monitoring committee? What are the members going to do? What are they going to monitor? Because of the time it takes to actually see some change and progress in those action plans. So it'll be that kind of a discussion that I'm hoping to have with you.
Great, yeah, I think just definitely timely to have it soon, because I think just the question is like, if we're gonna build a really coherent plan that's tied into our budget, we need to have some review process on, what is our progress, what are we doing, which is the action plans, and then how that ties into budget. And without that kind of linkage and having some community input at certain process of it, it's not integrated. And so I think, you know, when we can have recommendations and a discussion on that, that would be great. Thank you.
We have Councillor Armstrong, followed by Councillor Perino.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Hammond. One of the reasons we went to the GPC was so we would get more community involvement and I look around and always this is empty. So I don't think it's actually succeeding the way it's supposed to be. I think it's become a review for council. It's just, and I mean, and I agree, a lot of the stuff that we're getting is for review. You can just send it to me in an email. I would like us to get back to what this was originally for, was to get more community involvement. When I take a look at the public art review, why aren't we inviting all the different groups, you know, as to what they need, what they're missing from the city? You know, that's what I thought this was going to go towards in that direction when we set up the GPC. Again, for me, it's just like it's just like, let's just educate council, which I think is great too. Like, it's not wrong, but the whole purpose of GPC was trying to get more community engagement, and I think we've gone the opposite direction. So I think we should actually even have another conversation around the benefit of GPC, the way it's structured. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Chair. Regarding the public art review, and I apologize if I missed any of the discussion on this, but part of the reason why this discussion came up, and I think it's important, and something that Councillor Armstrong just added, which I think we need to incorporate, is when you look at the mural that's outside of the library, the books and you know, just that tremendous art piece that was done, and how exciting and interesting and effective that particular mural is. And we have other opportunities around, particularly our downtown, which might be really valuable. Not only that, but the discussion around where we might be able to get grants, what's available, who might be interested in doing this. I think we do need to find a date for a public art review and incorporate that. And that's when I think we need to, as Councillor Armstrong said, invite some of the different art groups to be a part of the discussion, so that it's not just learning from us, but a total discussion about what is possible and where the money might come from. So I'd like to make a motion that we do put that on the agenda within, as soon as possible. So in other words, you know, another available one, whether it's February, March.
We have a motion on the table. We have a seconder.
You don't want to see any art? I'm missing the point. I'm missing why that would not be wanted.
Councillor Hammond.
Jump in the queue here. It's not that I don't want it, it's that I want our committee time to be devoted to problem solving. And this is a staff recommendation. The community has not asked for that. Maybe the community would like it, but I'm reticent to put things on our agenda and by extension staff's agenda that we are not making decisions on. If we have a problem that, you know, we want to investigate ways to enhance our public art realm, then absolutely. So in that way, it would be tied to the integrated action plan. But again, it's not, and I think that's further to Councillor Gesselbach's point, is that these are just kind of floating out there, and it's really great information. I love having these conversations, but if it's not getting us further down the path.
Well, I definitely would want to see it get down the path, so you know, I'm fine with leaving it. But
I think my question to you, if you want us to support this at a GPC, is to be very specific about what you're looking for. And I would ask that the same of Councillor Armstrong, who suggested that this isn't quite meeting her needs. Let's be very specific about what our needs are, and then that makes it easier for staff as well.
Well, now you got me. Now you got me.
And I think, if I may, that's why I asked for a pause. I don't think we need to do this today. I think we can go and think about that.
Think about it and come back to it. I'm fine with that.
Okay. Next I have Councillor Thorpe.
Was there a motion on the floor, though?
Well,
or was it?
There was no seconder.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mayor, Acting Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to quickly chime in to say I support Councillor Hammond's earlier comments. I think we have not had a GPC meeting since sometime in July, and quite frankly, I haven't missed them at all. I don't think we should be having these meetings unless it is an emergent issue something that council wishes to debate or discuss, or something that staff feels strongly that needs to come in front of us. So I tend to agree that some things can be covered under a staff report or through other venues, and I don't think we should be spending this committee's time dealing with those issues unless they are something that we really feel we need to debate and discuss. So that the topics that have been put forward today, I think I totally support those. To Councillor Perino's suggestion, I don't think I would have, well, I didn't support that because I don't see the point of a sort of an open-ended general discussion with a bunch of art groups here. What are we getting out of that? What do we hope to accomplish? So again, I think this committee should be acting when there is a need for it, not simply to have a meeting for the sake of a meeting. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thanks. And I just wanted to point out to council, like first to Ms. Gurry and staff, I really appreciate the format of how this is set up. I don't want to ever get in a situation to discourage staff from bringing potential ideas forward that council potentially could benefit from being aware of, that is part of strategically, but they'd like to sort of get council's idea and go in the right direction or not. And it works this way. When staff have certain ideas, it comes on to the agenda planning and we can review it and we can have a discussion as council. Is this something that is worthwhile or not, just like we had now? And there's 3 items that maybe not be a priority and we don't want to use our governance and priorities time. And it's parked. And I think that is how it's functioning properly. This committee is driven by council. And when there's something that we bring forward through a motion, and hopefully council members have done their homework on what exactly they want to get out of that committee, it comes towards council, we have a discussion, we move it, and then it moves on to the governance and priorities committee. So I think it's functioning well. And some of these items council might not want to bite on, but I don't want to discourage staff ever from bringing elements forward, because there are certain things that, have come forward from staff. I'm like, hey, this is actually something I'd like to have a discussion on. It's a priority, and I appreciate the heads up. But it always goes through the council filter. So thanks for the implementation of the new processes, and it's working as it should. Thank you.
Thank you. I would tend to agree with that. Councillor Eastmere? Okay. Any other comments? So we're good to move on to the next agenda item. Next on our agenda is reports, Prosperous Nanaimo. And this is going to be introduced, it's on Nanaimo Donut Economic Framework Awareness Program, to be introduced by Ms. Mercer. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to just pass it over to Ms. Manhas to start the presentation, and then we'll ask the consultant to come in and present as well.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Manhas.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. So the purpose of this presentation is to provide you with an update on Donut Economics Framework awareness implementations. This refers to IAP item number 173 and 174, which really came from the Donut Economics Working Group that we had. To maintain and expand the Donut Economics Framework, we engaged with Future Fit Cities. They have expertise in this area. They also specialize in regenerative urban design. And we really gave them 2 specific tasks. One of them was to get a quick pulse on where we were with understanding and engagement on donut economics within the city of Nanaimo, as well as develop a roadmap for the future progress. So give us some items for the future in terms of how we can progress this and scale donut economics. And their engagement and assessment included doing interviews with some city staff across multiple departments, as well as some council members that had some time to engage with them. And we also had an in-person workshop that was done on May the 30th, and we had actually pretty much everybody we had invited to that workshop, 34 staff members, as well as a number of external partners like the Nanaimo Prosperity Corporation, Tourism Nanaimo, and Systems Planning Organization. They all attended. And the findings of this engagement and assessment you will find in your attachment A of the report. And I just also wanted to mention that although the workshop was done fairly recently, the interviews were done over about a year ago. So we have made a lot more progress on some of the suggestions in there than is reflected in the report. And Future Fit Cities basically recommended a 3-phase approach, and they go into this in detail for scaling donut economics in the city of Nanaimo. They have 8 specific action items that they said we should begin with in terms of how we should start the process. We have Greg Hart. He is the CEO and Managing Director of Future Fit Cities joining us to share more information about his findings, as well as to answer any questions that you have. And before we turn it over to Greg through the chair, I just wanted to thank Greg for accommodating this request, because he did accommodate this request pretty much with no notice at all. As well, he is on holidays right now, so it's great. Thank you so much, Greg, for making the time to join us today.
Thanks,
Thank you, Ms.
Amber.
Mazenhouse, and welcome, Mr. Hart. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. And sadly, I'm not on holidays, but I am in Oxford. And as luck would have it, we're having this conversation tonight, and I actually am spending the morning with Kate Rayworth tomorrow. So donut economics is very much part of the next 24 hours of my life. So thank you for that summary, Amrit. And I think what I would like to do is just hit a few of the highlights, and then, since you have the report, and then not take up too much time with that, and then definitely entertain any questions that any counselors might have. So I think the place to start, and I mean, this was mentioned in one of the earlier items on your agenda tonight, is the notion of the donut acting as something that helps build identity in a community, and that identity would lead to attachment and attraction. So one of the things that we found as we were going through the work, talking to people, doing the survey of people's sort of sense of the donut and its value, one of the things that we found was that we found specific examples of people who were attracted to work with the city of Nanaimo directly because of this initiative, which is a nice early sign that by creating this kind of identity, it does in fact attract people and potentially industry as well, which needs to be a big focus going forward. The other thing that I think is worth mentioning from that survey and those conversations is that there was a universal feeling about the benefit, what was seen as being the benefit and value of the donut economics approach, both internally and externally, and including that there's a sense that, you know, the greater population of Nanaimo outside of the city itself, the municipality that is, should have an increased understanding of the benefits of this approach and the things that it can lead to. So there was very little feedback that we received from anybody that was, questioning the value of this approach, or from a brand perspective or from an operational perspective in terms of hitting the targets that Nanaimo would like to as a community. In addition to that, I think there's 2 things that really need to be mentioned here and emphasized as very strong actions that the city of Nanaimo has taken. And I'm making this comment from the perspective of somebody who's spent a lot of time with organizations around the world who are trying to implement these kinds of ideas. There are 2 things that really stand out to me. 3 things I'd like to cover. One is the enthusiasm of the internal team at the city of Nanaimo for this, as Amrit pointed out. The participation in our work with them and the workshop that we did was extremely strong. The second thing I would point out is the monitoring strategy that Ting Pen put together with the help of another consultant is actually a world-leading piece of work in this regard. And I'm going to come back to this notion of how we implement donut economics, and the fact that this context-based monitoring strategy that has been developed, we consider to be one of the best pieces that we can see in the world right now to help with that successful implementation and monitoring of donut economics. So I think that's really something worth emphasizing. And then the final thing that I would like to emphasize with regard to what's happening right now is the integrated action plan. This is actually incredibly rare as well, to be able to have that kind of integration occurring in the way that a city approaches the work that it does. And, you know, we've encountered cities before who have talked about doing something like this, but have not succeeded in actually beginning to work in this way, and remain sort of in siloed plans for transportation and other things. And so it's quite encouraging to see this in play. And these last two things, the monitoring framework and the integrated action plan, are the things that make it possible for this to actually work. And this may seem strange to say, but a lot of cities who embrace the idea of the donut really like the sort of elegant visual that it represents about how you could put a city together into the present and in the future. But in a lot of cases, there's a lot of difficulty going beyond that to how do we actually make that happen. So it's one thing to kind of get a picture of where a city might be at any moment with respect to the goals of the donut, but having a way of getting to successful outcomes in this regard is something that is less common. And so that's why I have to emphasize that the contextual monitoring strategy is a huge step in the right direction there, as is the integrated action plan and that way of working that brings about, because there is no way to reach any of the ambitions of donut economics by operating in a non-integrated fashion. So even, you know, many of the things that were just discussed in the previous item on the agenda are all things that are examples of this, including parking and, you know, even arts and culture and everything. The picture of the donut is one of integration and not one of, you know, separate, reduced little pieces of things that all get dealt with individually. It recognizes that there are important feedback mechanisms between many of these items that influence the success of each other and are not things that are done in isolation. So I would also then call attention to the fact that, kind of moving towards the recommendations we made about the things that could be done next, that with those two pieces in play right now, the monitoring and the IAP, it starts to focus more on what are the ways and how does the city of Nanaimo start to now move towards making significant achievements against the idea of donut economics. And the donut is a kind of compass, because there is no map to this kind of territory. This is not the way things have been done before in Nanaimo or in most other places. So the donut sort of forms this picture of what it might look like if we're successful and give us some guidance. And then there needs to be a further sort of building out of a compass, which takes into account things like what is the experience promise that's being created for the people who live and work and play in Nanaimo? What are the principles that will allow for the sort of regenerative actions that need to take place, that then pull in these questions of economic development, as well as making, you know, strong inroads on social foundations, as well as the planetary boundary issues. And so this has got to be the focus of the upcoming work, is to sort of set a foundation basically amongst the internal key stakeholders, as well as the core stakeholders just outside the city of Nanaimo, to start to lay the groundwork to really have some successful results, so that when that monitoring work is being done every year, it's easy to point to progress occurring and understanding how that progress is occurring. And so really that's the three-phase process that we're outlining there. And I think that something else to emphasize in this process is that right now, most of the momentum around this idea of donut economics exists within the city of Nanaimo, which is a very important and very powerful thing. But in phase two, we talk about broadening education and engagement is to actually start to transfer some of that momentum outside of the city itself, so that over time, in order for this to be a truly regenerative thing, it has to have the conditions for life, and which is to say that it needs to be able to self-renew without continuous input of energy from, you know, a couple of champions or whatever. In the near term, the Champions Network and the building of the foundation around having a compass and all that, and building an accelerator roadmap, absolutely vital. But very quickly thereafter, the work needs to start to transfer that momentum into something that can have its sort of ongoing life, that will largely come from seeing the successes as well of things that are being done that are addressing the objectives of the donut. And I mean, in the workshop that we did, we also saw in that workshop that there are a couple of examples of programs that have been running in Nanaimo, which actually do fit really well into the sort of integrated picture of the donut, and are great examples and stories that can be shared and built on, so that it doesn't stay as this sort of abstract, you know, idea, but that's something that people can plug into and understand exactly how it works on a day-to-day basis, and how it improves the livability of the city, as well as how it meets any commitments in terms of in the global community. So that's sort of a flywheel effect that we're looking for there, is to transfer some momentum from that's inside the city of Nanaimo right now, build that momentum more strongly by getting some more foundations underneath it, and then be able to transfer that momentum into the external community so that it can start to work with other organizations. It's pretty evident to us that something like the Nanaimo Prosperity Corporation would be a natural kind of pivot point for that flywheel effect going out into the community from inside the city of Nanaimo. But there will be others who will also similarly want to get involved. And then it becomes really important for us to see a couple of keystone projects that are integrated projects that everybody can see as an example of how it works, that then build the story for the future and attract more attachment to the concept, more attachment to the identity, as people see the actual benefit of this, and don't see it as a trend of the year or anything like that, but as it gets seen as a legitimate way to build the identity of the city of Nanaimo, and to attract the kinds of companies and behaviors that will have Nanaimo very clearly differentiated from many other cities, both in the local format, but also increasingly on a global scale. And then that should set the groundwork for being able to improve monitoring processes and deciding what is the best way to do monitoring, in conjunction with the framework that's been developed, and entering into a very iterative learning process over time. And that will be the sorts of things that will lead to long-term success, which is with a focus on how it's done, sharing the stories, and building momentum so that people see that this is something that is contributing significant benefit to the experience of living in Nanaimo. And that's where I'll leave it for the moment, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Are there any questions from council? Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. One of my questions is, was there any reason why only city-sponsored programs were chosen to be involved in this instead of businesses like the Chamber of Commerce and stuff? Because, we hear a lot of negative from them on it. So, we're not getting impact from the people that are most impacted by it, as well as citizens.
Yeah, I would say that those two things are the immediate next steps in terms of transferring that the momentum I'm talking about. I think the focus here was to try to have a good, clear picture of what's going on within the city of Nanaimo in terms of how it's working and integrating with program inside the city of Nanaimo. But I completely agree that there is no really big long-term success without expanding the conversation and demystifying, I would say, because otherwise people might see it as something that's counter to their objectives in the case of the business community, for instance, which it is not. But we can't know that without having a conversation with them and back to the idea of building examples so that people can see the actual benefit instead of it just being something theoretical. But to answer your question, the initial context was to focus mostly internally to see kind of where the check was there and to start to get a feeling for what would be the next steps. And we certainly heard, sort of as you're describing right now, through other people that, there are concerns that exist, in the business community, for instance.
Secondly, when you do the next steps, will you be looking at a cost-benefit analysis? Because, I've done a lot of research on this, obviously, when it came up, and I'm sure I didn't vote for it based on that research. Will you be looking at the cost factors that it costs to implement this versus sticking with the old system?
Yeah, I think that's an important part of monitoring. If we're only looking at how well the program is functioning against social and environmental elements, then I think it's undermining the entire idea of donut economics, which is focused on an integrated view of economics. So that absolutely has to be clear. And as I said, it's not really working if the costs are enormous relative to the benefits, because the whole idea is for this to be a regenerative economy, which means that it has a lot of self-propelling, self-renewing capability that does not require huge inputs of resources to maintain it. It requires inputs of resources in the very beginning to get it moving, but it's a different way of behaving that actually should have much lower costs than sort of traditional forms of doing economic development.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Gesselbrot.
Thanks. One thing that's kind of come up, we adopted the donut economic framework and then, built it into our official community plan. And, all the different goals within it, there's very little argument in terms of support for it.
Right.
Where issues arose is basically on branding, where just the name donut economics, for folks that are, fearful of whatever and think it's this crazy wild left-wing ideology, it's easy to just tag it to that name and then people dismiss it without even looking into it. And there has been discussion, just to avoid the rigmarole of just wasting hot air on, branding issue, to really focus on what it's about, which is the goals and the objectives we're trying to achieve decided by the community, and drop donut and just call it the Nanaimo framework. And so that's been a dialogue, and for myself, that's kind of the area I was trending in. But speaking to people externally, like the amount of people that have identified with donut economics and have been attracted to come work here, and the talent, and even like industry being like, hey, this is what people that want to actually do something are attracted and contribute with. I've started to change my orientation. Like, you know what, we should just stick to our guns, because this is a really good thing, and when people look into it, it's hard to argue against. But I'm curious if that's come up sort of in circles in other cities, or what you've dealt with, because I could say a year ago I was just frustrated, whatever, I don't want to waste my breath on stupid conversations. But at the same time, now looking at it, turn it after a year, the attraction that it's created, even attracting key positions within our city that people have worked here with, elaborate professional skill sets. So yeah, could you speak to that? Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, it does come up. And we are living in a time where labels get attached to things, and as you intimated that, conspiracies are built around those labels and everything else. And I think the tension on this one is exactly what you've identified here. In principle, at the end of the day, this is about operating in a regenerative way, which is different than the way that things have been done before, and is necessary because the way that things have been done is not sustainable. And so what it gets called at the end of the day, you know, when I look at that, I would say it doesn't really matter. It's just something that we need to learn how to do, or actually relearn how to do, quite, put a fine point on it. And it's something that it doesn't matter what it's called. However, the brand value of this idea, and it is an elegant idea, that's why it caught some fire, is because, you know, it's a very simple rendering of a very complex situation. And so, and it does have some cachet internationally that people recognize. They see it as a signature of something. And so we definitely heard from people locally who had concerns about the name. I've had those conversations internationally as well about people who have concerns about the name. Overall, I would say that, and this is just anecdotally, I mean, I haven't really tracked this, but I would say overall that is less likely to have that conversation, that somebody would be concerned about that, but it's there, right? But I think the thing you trade off is, like, if I looked at it and said, if the city of Nanaimo puts in place the Nanaimo framework, it's a regenerative framework, it works really well, and, you know, can be monitored and everything, great. Who really cares what it's called? The piece that at least in the short term, that you lose is sort of this international connection and for attraction of industry and key people.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Perino.
Chair. Thank you, Chair. I agree with you, Councillor Gasserbrook. Just to say, this is a framework about sustainability, and it's a good one. That's not the problem. It's how you market it. And I disagree with you. I don't think it's a name that holds people. And that's what I've heard over and over and over again, that the name is just, it's weak and it's frivolous. That's the trouble that I'm finding when I talk to people about this. It just doesn't hold strength to it, which I'm very disappointed, because when you look at this, and the attachment that we received on this was an excellent document, and it is about economics, and it is about sustainability and integrating an appropriate way to move forward in the future. But the term donut is sweet and soft, and I think it's a terrible mistake. That's just I've had a terrible time trying to sell this, and I'm not sure we ever will. But so I appreciate Councillor Gasserbrook's statements. I've really struggled with this one, and I wish there was a better name. Thank you.
I have a couple of questions myself. You know, when I looked at the donut economic model, I'm thinking about well-being economy, circular economy, regenerative economy, and rather than looking at a series of 18 graphs and pie charts, you're seeing everything in one representation. And I think it's really important that we do measure the well-being of our community, because, you know, we have, in our last point in time count, 515 homeless people, estimated more like 800 to 1,000. That's not a community that is doing well in terms of its most vulnerable citizens, the seniors and the people with disabilities that end up on the street because housing's not affordable. I'm curious about what kind of specific projects or examples you might have in mind in terms of how we measure this and how we demonstrate the value of this model.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. There are, so one of the things that I think is a real temptation when it comes to dealing things, the homelessness is an excellent example to talk about, and the social disorder that's associated with that. These are on two levels. An issue like this, as you said, first of all, you sort of look inside and say, as a community, if this is something that's happening in our community, we're not being successful at the level that we need to be. And then the second side of it is that in terms of its public facing kind of the complex feelings that it generates in a population when these sorts of things are visible, is also problematic and related to the first point, which, you know, people don't know how to deal with that idea, but that it's uncomfortable. So this leads us to a place where we say, okay, we need to solve this problem of homelessness. And it would be tempting to take the donut framework and say, let's run a project or two that is aimed at solving the homelessness problem. A regenerative lens looking at something like that tries to move away from this sort of like reduced, you know, looking at the homelessness problem through a sort of reduced lens, which is like it's a problem that needs to be eliminated. Because it's linked to so many other things, as I'm sure everybody knows on council. And so if we're going to run a project, then my recommendation would be that the projects that we run are built around identifying some potential in terms of how things would be working inside the city in a way that we would identify as being desirable. And this is where the monitoring framework is very helpful, because it starts to lay out what some of those things are. And, you know, I wouldn't suggest any specific project, so to speak, but I think there's a process there where once we get everybody through understanding sort of the foundation of how the regenerative approaches work, it will become very obvious which things mean the most to Nanaimo as steps that could be taken that would deliver visible results in a relatively short period of time. That may affect more than one problem area that people are looking at right now. So it may have some impact on, say, social disorder and homelessness, but it may also impact some other areas. So I don't really have, you know, it's sort of a Nanaimo conversation to have about where those projects are focused, but it's the approach to them, I think, that's quite different. Because I mean, you know, just as an example, you know, in Calgary, where I've done a lot of work, that, you know, there was a 10-year plan to end homelessness in 2008. And in 2018, when that 10-year plan came to an end with a lot of effort and a lot of resources deployed, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I'm pretty sure that the homelessness problem was more serious than it was in 2008. So this idea of we're going to pick a problem and then we're going to eliminate that problem does not have a great track record anywhere. So I would say my biggest response to your question would be that we get everybody understanding how the approach is different in a regenerative framework, and then select something that we can work on that will deliver some benefits and some results in a fairly short period of time.
Thank you. I've always thought of it as more of a holistic approach to how we work in the community. So when you talked about projects or examples, I mean, if we measure everything by GDP, we have a major pile up on the highway. That's great for GDP because it means business for doctors, it means business for auto wreckers and repair shops and everything else. In a neighborhood, if we decided to slap up a bunch of towers in a neighborhood without any green space or amenities or anything else, it would be good for the gross domestic product because we'd have that money flowing through the community, but is it good for the well-being of the community without green space or the amenities or the quality of life that people need? So I see it more as an approach, a holistic approach. So I wasn't sure exactly what you meant by projects or examples. Councillor Brown, you have a question.
Thanks. Thank you, Chair. Councillor Manley. I do have to step out here for a little bit. So I just want to say, Mr. Hart and staff, I really appreciated this report and the work behind it. I know this has gained positive and negative discussion, and I think a lot of it actually comes down to a lot of these recommendations, and that's just a little bit of a lack of understanding of exactly what it is. So I'm quite appreciative of the approach and the recommendations, and if I'm here for the time of vote, I would be supporting them. Because at the end of the day, I think there's a temptation to sort of view what it is incorrectly. as something that generates checklists in which you need to, check a box in something. And it's actually not that. It's an analysis framework for decision making. I would say it's arguably just a more complex, something like a version of the Eisenhower decision making matrix. It's taking a bunch of variables and rooting them on one end, rooting them in hard science. And that hard science does change as new things come in, and the model can easily adapt to that. And then on the bottom are social values. The economy is not a goal in that. The economy is the action in which you operate between those two spheres. And so that decision-making matrix, yes, it's more complex, but that's the beauty of the model. It's simplified. I think these kind of steps here, to me, the perfect next steps around going slow, bringing people along, finding champions, finding where it's working, finding how we can start to practically do that analysis on big projects. And then hopefully we start getting down to where people are incorporating that decision-making framework into their little decisions that they make that never even come to the council table or to the broader community. So highly supportive. Thank you for the work on this, both Mr. Hart, staff, and thank you, Chair, for allowing me just to provide some comment.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you very much for the report, Mr. Hart. Really appreciate it, and for the discussion, the options that you've put out, and for taking the time to spend with us today. While you're busy doing other things in Oxford, so thank you very much, and thank you to staff for the report as well. Did you have any follow-up, Ms. Manhouse?
No, I think we're good. I'm glad you've had this opportunity to speak with Mr. Hart. He is well versed in this topic for sure, so it's a great resource for us to have for sure. And then we just basically thought in terms of next steps, staff could present a proposed work plan and strategies to council with budget implications during the 2026 to 2030 budget implications discussions.
Okay, sounds good. Do you need a motion for that, or is that?
No.
Mr. Lindsay?
Yes, please.
Okay. Would somebody like to make that motion? Oh, actually, I have a speakers list here. Did you want to speak to this? Okay. Somebody want to put the motion on the table? Oh, Tyler. Okay. Second. Second, Councillor Eastmere. All those in favor? And any opposed? Seeing none opposed. Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Manhouse.
Thank you.
Moving along, we have question period now. We have any questions? Okay, so then the next item on the agenda is a motion for adjournment. Moved by Councillor Eastmere, second by Councillor Perino. All those in favor?